The book is called Dynamics of Faith. And one of the most important things to know if you want to tackle this dense, difficult text is that he doesn't mean by faith what we mean by faith. When we say faith, meaning believing in something for which there's not complete evidence, for example, the existence of God, he uses the word belief. He means faith in a very unusual way. He means the integrated human being with a knowledge of all the disparate dimensions of their life, having moments of powerful integration, powerful moments of self-realization, where they reach toward the God beyond God. They don't believe in something because it's dogma. They don't believe in something because someone taught them to believe it. They don't believe in slogans. They don't believe in simple ideas. They're reaching toward the God beyond God, which is a humbling experience and essentially a mystical experience. So when he starts talking about faith in this book, he doesn't mean what I thought faith meant before I read the book, or you thought. By that he means belief. He's actually creating a new concept, which is how the integrated human being, in an act of transcendence, in an act of self-realization, reaches toward the God beyond God. So I've gone through a few of the chapters of the dynamics of faith, what is faith, what faith is not. I want to say a couple of things about his chapter on the symbols of faith, and then go straight to Passover. So he talks about what is a symbol of faith. Number one, it's like a sign in that it points to something that's not existent. So a sign says, this is Main Street. This is Broadway. The sign might point, the freeway's over there. So signs and symbols point to something else. What a symbol has is it somehow speaks the power of something. For example, a national flag. For example, the national emblem. So when you think of a symbol, think of something that not only indicates something, but it indicates the depth of something, and it communicates the power. So, for example, when I see an image of the Declaration of Independence, it's not asking me to read it. It's asking me to, in some way, to experience the power of a nation founded on ideas and ideals that we are continually aspiring to live up to, but it articulates the ideas and the ideals that remain at the center of our national consciousness. And another, by the way, this is in Dynamics of Faith, the Symbols of Faith. It's an easy book to get. It's not expensive. A third characteristic of a symbol is that it opens up levels of reality that are otherwise closed to us. I'll bring this all together when I talk about Passover in just a moment. So it reveals deeper realities if you live in a symbolic world, like the poem that Shanti just read. The sun is no longer the heated center of our solar system. It's a symbol of creation and the passage of time and the passage of life. If you look at all the symbols of the poem that Shanti read, none of them signal something. All of them symbolize something. And when you read the poem altogether, it evokes a reality that you would not have thought of had you not read the poem. And this is the part of the power of poetry, is it makes the world of symbols come alive. He says a symbol's fourth characteristic is not only that it opens up dimensions and elements of reality, but it also unlocks dimensions and elements of our souls. Another way of saying this is the only way we can read a poem well is with our souls. The only way you can read liturgy well is with your soul. I mean, many people who say, I don't believe in the liturgy, I say, it's not something to believe in. It's poetry to experience that helps your soul reach toward the God beyond God. So when people say, I don't believe in the liturgy, I don't think the liturgy asks us to believe in it. Our liturgy asks us to engage in it as a doorway to divine consciousness. So symbols not only reveal dimensions of consciousness in life, they require the opening up of the soul. Symbols happen organically. I can artificially create a symbol and say, hey, everybody, look at my new symbol. They grow organically, because the community, like, for example, Harjo's poetry. She hasn't tried to make a case for us to read her poetry. She just wrote the poetry. And we're drawn to her poetry. And thank you, Shanti, so much for bringing us to her poetry. Symbols act as a part of the collective unconscious, meaning when we read this poetry, we have a shared sense of what the words mean, and it somehow collects us all together, as we do on Friday nights when we read this poetry. Last thing I'll say is, in religious terminology, poetries exist in narratives. Symbols exist in narratives that he calls myths. And you might say a myth is a formulation about reality in which symbols are used. And one thing that indicates, I'm going to say the demythologizing project begins in the Hebrew Bible. The God of the Hebrew Bible is not in a pantheon. There are no myths in Genesis about the God of the Bible. We're told in the Bible not to create any images of God. So the God of the Hebrew Bible cannot be reduced to some Canaanite idol or something. The Bible's insistent about that. In fact, we're going to study tomorrow afternoon at our gathering, Jeremiah. A person said to me, why does Jeremiah hate people? He doesn't hate people. He hates people that think that idols name ultimate reality. He hates the spiritual mistake of, as Tillich would say, confusing the limited with the unlimited, confusing non-ultimate reality with ultimate reality. And that's just profoundly offensive to the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is harsh, Tillich is not, but I think they share a sensibility. So the process of demythologizing begins in the Hebrew Bible. Now, remember, Tillich is a Protestant theologian. He comes of age in the 1920s and 30s, where there's a profound demythologizing project going on in Protestant Christianity. Now, the evangelicals aren't buying it. Virgin birth means virgin birth. Son of God means son of God. That's it. It's literal. In what we'll call the demythologizing project of Paul Tillich and, for example, Rudolf Bultmann, they realize that these are myths, meaning we're not, he calls them broken myths. When you look at Christ being the Son of God, he says, a modern person can't take it literally. I mean, there are just too many questions about that. So it's a broken myth, meaning we can't read it literally. But it's a powerful myth in that it's communicating something to us. The way that God emanates God's presence into an earthly realm, that God sacrificed an aspect of God's self through grace as an act of redemption. On the Jewish side, when people say, I don't believe that the Torah was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, I said, you don't have to believe it, but you can encounter it as a broken myth, meaning, what does it mean that God communicates to human beings a law that will save us from ourselves, save us from each other, and communicates, in a sense, the grace of God's goodness held within the container of a code of behavior, without which we would burst forth and destroy ourselves and destroy others. When we are contained, then we can find God's love and grace. So that's what I would call the broken myth at the core of Judaism. He talks about the broken myth at the core of Christianity. So one of the most beautiful things about Tillich is this idea of the broken myth, which he discusses at the end of the chapter on the symbols of faith. So let's go to Passover just very briefly. I've been asking myself, what is the core symbol of Passover? Now, you might think matzah. Actually, it's not. For me, matzah exists within another symbol, because when matzah is mentioned, it's mentioned in Exodus 12, they're using matzah. But already in 13 and 14, they know that later generations aren't going to know what it means. So it says, when your child asks you, what is this? Mazeh. if you notice where the symbols are discussed in the Haggadah, they explain them by the prompt of the question. When your child asks you, what is matzah? Here's what you say. When your child asks you, what is the charoset? Here's what you say. When your child asks you, what is the paschal lamb? Here's what you say. Notice these symbols of Passover are found in a deeper symbol called questioning. Now, we can't have a symbol for questioning. I mean, it's very hard to have a symbol to represent a concept. So the concept of questioning is communicated by the Seder, by the symbols of the Seder. They all come from the book of Exodus saying, when your child asks you, and then it says, vihigadata, and here's what you say. The word Haggadah is from the word higadata, which means when you attempt to answer their questions. Now, I can't overemphasize how important this is because many people say to me, I love Judaism because it is a religion of questions. More than anything, more than a religion of dogma, a religion of beliefs, it's a religion of questions. And when do we celebrate this? At Passover. Now, why do I find this so important? I want to give you one tiny example. I was counseling a young man who's having a really tough time at college. And he came to me and said, isn't an education just an endeavor by the man, by the system to co-opt us and just make us functionaries of corporate America? I said, maybe, but where'd you hear that? Well, some teacher said it. I said, okay, is that just a bid to make you function in the corporate system because you learned it from a teacher? He said, no, well, that wasn't. I said, excellent. So how do you know the difference between teachings that are authentic and teachings that are just corporate America trying to co-opt the student? Clearly, you heard one thing from a teacher, another thing from a teacher. Some of them is mere co-opting you, and other ones are telling you the truth. Do you have a criterion for which is which? And he said, never thought about it. And then, of course, I thought to myself, for all of this young man's terrific and expensive high school and college education, no one ever sat this young man down and taught him how to question what I thought to me was a pretty simple question, which is, how do you know which teacher's telling the truth? So he said to me, so Rabbi Finley, do you think there is something called the truth? I'm looking at Mel. Yeah, physicists can talk typically about something like mathematical truth. I said, but no one has ever seen an atom, as far as I know. No one has ever seen subatomic reality. Why do we assume it's true? Because people who we trust describe it with pretty good evidence for a lay person. I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a physicist, but I read the stuff and I say, I believe you. And I said to him, if you don't mind my saying this, in the realm of spirituality and morality, I'm like a physicist. I've studied this my whole life. So until you have a different teacher, you can trust me. He says, why should I trust you? I said, well, why not? Why don't you trust me first? When you find fault with what I say, then trust somebody else. But you got to start somewhere, and you have to learn how to question. One thing that I do with anybody who studies with me, I guarantee I will teach you how to question. I don't tell people to believe in me. One thing that I teach, the dogma that I teach, is the dogma of learning how to question. Question theories. Question what people are claiming. Find your own individual autonomy. So for me, one of the deepest dimensions of Passover for me is the entire Haggadah is from the term vihigadata, you shall tell, in response to the question. So one thing I want to do Shabbos morning tomorrow is discuss more of the symbols of Passover. I want to do it next week as well. And I might do a session on the Wednesday before Pesach, meaning March 29th, maybe from 6 to 7:30 or so, and just an open-ended Q&A on any aspect of Passover that anybody wants to ask me to produce a fun, meaningful, and deep Seder. So I'll think about whether I have the energy. I'm still supposed to be on light duty. I'm not doing that very well. But if I think I'll have the energy to both do my Tuesday night class and a Wednesday class, we'll let everybody know by the flyer. By the way, my Tuesday classes just started. If you want to jump in there, you can. I'll send you the recording. But after this coming week, then you'll just have to wait till the next time around. So we've had a lot tonight, especially this Tillis idea of the symbols of faith. And the main thing about the symbols of faith is they open up consciousness. They open up dimensions of the soul. They open up unseen, unknown realities. If it doesn't do that, then it's not a symbol of faith. It's just a placeholder. It's a dead symbol. It doesn't have the power to release the power of the soul. So another reason I just love this book. It's a dense book. It's far more. When I began to start teaching it, then I knew how dense the book is. I remember loving it when I was in college, and the other times I've read it, I didn't remember how dense it was. Hopefully you can look at my talks. We're putting them up all on YouTube. You don't have to read the book. I'm going to summarize the essential parts. But please pay attention to this book. It is one of the most important books you can know. Dynamics of Faith by Paul Tillich. By the way, he wrote it in English, and I found the German translation, and I found the updated German translation because of the profound criticism of the first German translation of Dynamics of Faith, which people said is not a good translation. Now, why he chose to write in English, not German, I have a few ideas. The commentary in German, my German's not good enough to read it easily, but I can struggle through it. The commentary of the German tradition is actually quite good. So the next time around when I teach Dynamics of Faith, I'll be able to present to you some of the very, very fine commentary in the German language. Give me a year on that, and I'll get back to you.